It was a time of tradition and innovation, a rare time when both coincide. Byzantine schools based their instruction on classical Greek thought. We have heroic epics, the surviving tragedies of Athenian dramatists in the 5th century, the philosophy of Plato, and the historical prose of Thucydides. We have Aristotle's works, which were less well known, but many other philosophical traditions of antiquity were deemed dangerous. Justinian would shut down the Athenian academies due to a fear of paganism, though they would continue for some centuries moving forward. Tradition was more highly prized than originality, but Byzantium rescued Greek and Hellenistic writings for later ages. We have a vast majority of ancient Greek texts that are known today. They only survive because they were copied by Byzantine scribes. The Byzantine educational system was inclusive, open to the laity and even to women. Most girls from aristocratic families were educated at home by private tutors. Even female physicians would be seen in Byzantium. Practice of Greek scientific inquiry and Hellenistic science were also neglected, sadly. So, it was far from perfect. With that in mind, welcome back to the Byzantine world. Here we have the Hagia Sophia, this great monument to the artistry, engineering skill, and spirituality of Byzantium. It was built during the reign of Justinian. The four minarets at its corners were added in 1453 after Constantinople, now Istanbul, now Constantinople, now Istanbul, now Constantinople, now was absorbed into the empire of the Ottoman Turks. The Hagia Sophia is now a mosque, but also a museum, which ironically saved much of the medieval artwork under it by plastering over said artwork. Yet, I digress. Here is the dome of the Hagia Sophia, still on display today. The revolutionary structure of the church, at least shown here, made it appear as though the enormous dome would be floating on mere light and air.
The Church of Hagia Sophia, Holy Wisdom, the exterior plan became not focused on human achievement, but instead mysteries of Christian religion and holy knowledge. So the focus on the interior. The interior was filled with mosaics, gold leaf, and marble columns. Architectural uniqueness, especially the magnificent dome, and had an influence on the West. Civilization that formed around the religion of Islam mirrors the Roman Empire in its global reach and longevity. The Arabs considered themselves Rome's second heir. Muhammad, the founder of Islam, was a member of the Quraysh. He was born in Mecca around 570. Orphaned, he entered the service of a rich widow that he married. Until middle age, he lived as a prosperous trader. But around 610, he experienced a spiritual epiphany. He received revelations and converted to monotheism. Further revelations persuaded him to accept the calling of a prophet and proclaim the new faith to his tribe.
Arabian society was a polytheistic and also a tribal one. Many Arabs are herdsmen, some were long distance traders and guarded the transit routes between Africa and Asia. Towns would emerge, Mecca being one of them. This is an ancient sacred site which lay at the crossroads of major caravan routes, as many sacred sites do. Home to the Kaaba, the housing of the black stone worshipped by many of the Arabian tribes. The Quraysh, the tribe that controlled this shrine, came to dominate the economic and religious life of the region, forming an aristocracy of traders and entrepreneurs.
Muhammad was not successful in gaining converts. In Mecca, tribal leaders of the Quraysh feared his teachings would diminish the importance of the Kaaba, but some residents of the town of Yathrib saw an opportunity to increase the prestige and invited Muhammad to live among them to serve as judge and arbiter in local rivalries. Muhammad and a few loyal friends accepted this invitation in 622.
This emigration, what is now the Hijra, marks the beginning of time in the Muslim calendar. Muhammad changed the name Yathrib to Medina and became the town's ruler. He did not abandon his desire to exercise authority amongst his own people. He began a series of military raids of particularly Quraysh caravans traveling beyond Mecca. He would get lucky and receive an important early victory in 624, the Battle of Badr, where a small number of loyal adherents would defeat a much larger force sent from Mecca. Muhammad's men would kill the expedition's leader and take the valuable plunder as well as prisoners. This success would send a very powerful message to the Quraysh and inspired many men to join him. Here's a picture of the Kaaba today. The shrine housing the sacred stone is still the focus of the annual Muslim pilgrimage to Mecca and the birthplace of Muhammad.
In 627, the Quraysh assembled a large force to attack Medina, hoping for Jewish aid. Muhammad risked siege of his city and had a deep defensive trench to be dug around it. The Meccan army, not equipped for an extended battle, dispersed. The Battle of the Trench. The Jews of Medina had not joined forces with the Meccans. The Muslims still charged them with treason, executed all the men, and enslaved the women and children.
There would be further opposition. Jewish tribes in the region joined with Muhammad's Arab enemies. This act would lead Muhammad to denounce the Jews as faithless to their prophets and expel all but one Jewish clan from Medina and the surrounding region. Note, this is a political just as much as a religious affair. Mecca was already a pilgrimage site, and more people would be exposed to Muhammad's teachings and inspired by his military success, which promised prosperity for his people both. When he died in 632, Islam would become a established faith. By 630, Muhammad's successors would persuade his kinsmen to submit to his authority. He would ensure that the Kaaba's shrine would be revered as Islam's holiest place.
Islam called for submission to Allah, whom Muslims identify as being the same as the Jews' Yahweh and the Christian God. The history and prophecies of the Jews was an important component of their religion. Jesus is regarded as a great prophet, but Muhammad is regarded as the greatest prophet.
Nothing like being first among equals. His teachings, though, would be preserved in the Quran, the recitations, mostly because Muhammad would recite his revelations orally. Eventually, they would be gathered together and transcribed, which would continue after his death. The Quran is considered to be a direct link with Muhammad, but unlike most books of the Bible, it takes the form of poetry. Here are some leaves from the oldest extant copy of the Quran. Scholars at the University of Birmingham, England, would announce that 2 leaves of the Quran manuscript had been carbon dated to the years 568 and 645 CE, or at least somewhere between the two, because carbon dating can only give us a range of years. This extraordinary discovery, though, suggests that at least some of Muhammad's teachings were written down much earlier than previously thought, possibly even during his lifetime, and certainly within a decade or so after his death, which marks this very distinctly from Judaism and Christianity. The implications of this evidence will be debated by Arabic scholars and historians of Islam for years to come.
While we cannot go over every aspect of Islamic thought, we can boil them down into two central concepts. Fundamental choice, to begin a new life of divine service or to follow one's own path, to follow God. Blessed, if not, God will turn away. We also have the 5 pillars of the faith, Submission to God's will as described in the teachings of Muhammad, frequent prayer, ritual fasting, the giving of alms, and the annual pilgrimage.
Islam doesn't have priests like, say, Rabbinic Judaism does. After the destruction of the Second Temple, well, temple priesthood really is viewed as obsolete. Jewish communities would gather around a rabbi, and Muslims often rely on an imam, a scholar qualified to comment on matters of faith. Islam teaches that a day of judgment is coming and that the righteous will be granted eternal life in a paradise of delights, but wrongdoers would be damned to a realm of eternal fire. Like Judaism, Islam also emphasizes the inextricable connection between religious observance and daily life, between spirituality and politics. There's no opposition of sacred and secular authority as we see in Christianity. Unlike Judaism, Islam, however, is a religion that aspires to unite the world in a single shared faith. Muslims, like Christians, are conversion oriented.
With these fundamentals in hand, we can begin to understand how and why Islamic peoples began to dominate the West. Combined with the wealth from a trading empire, effective use of cavalry, and qualified, educated leadership. It is no wonder why Islamic people began to conquer their way toward Western Europe. Muhammad's closest followers, his father in law, Abu Bakr, and an early convert named Umar. After Muhammad's death, they named Abu Bakr as caliph. When Abu Bakr died, Umar succeeded him as caliph. He directed Muslim forces against Byzantium and Persia. Victories were virtually continuous. In 636, he routed a Byzantium army in Syria and occupied Antioch, Damascus, and Jerusalem. In 637, he destroyed the Persian Empire and took the capital of Ctesiphon. By 651, the Arab conquest of the entire Persian Empire was virtually complete.
Many tribes would be unwilling to accept Abu Bakr's authority, leading to much unrest. As armies loyal to Bakr moved northward, their successes would encourage men to embrace Islam and join the fight to establish the faith. They met real minimal resistance from the Byzantine and Persian armies as they would make their way westward. Egypt would fall in 646, and the Arabs would cross to the Visigothics in Spain in 711. In less than a century, followers of Islam would conquer their way through Western Asia and much of the Roman Mediterranean. Here's a visual representation, the expansion of Islam up through 750. This map shows the steady advance of Islam through the Arab conquests from the time of Muhammad to the middle of course, the 8th century. What was the geographical extent of the Muslim rule in 750? Compare this map to Justinian's that we saw last time. Which of these territories had formerly belonged to Rome? What resources would have been available to the Muslim conquerors as they would move into these territories?
For as much as the Islamic world was united by their faith, it also divided them. Uthman, murdered in 656, Ali's supporters declared him the new caliph, but Uthman's family refused to accept him. When Ali was murdered, another Umayyad replaced him. 661 to 750. The Umayyad dynasty ruled the Islamic world from Damascus. Ali's followers formed a separate group, the Shiite. They insisted that only descendants of Ali and his wife, Muhammad's daughter, Fatima, could rule the Muslim community. They did not accept religious practices, Sunnah, that had developed under the first two caliphs. Those Muslims who supported the Umayyad family were called Sunnis.
These disputes divided the original Muslims of Mecca. When Umar died in 644, he'd be replaced by Uthman, a member of the Umayyad family. He had long resisted Muhammad's authority Opponents of Uthman would rally around Muhammad's cousin and son-in-law Ali. This division lasts even into today. Persecuted by the Sunni majority as heretics, the Shiites consider themselves the only true exponents of Islam. Today, Shiites predominate in Iran and are the largest Muslim group in Iraq. Here's the Great Umayyad Mosque at Damascus. This mosque is built by Caliph al-Walid between 705 and 715. Bad for 10 years. The Byzantine influence is apparent in its arched colonnades, mosaics, series of domes, all of which were replicated in many ways by subsequent Islamic architectural engineers. The mosaic over the central doorway, shown here, indicates that the visitor is entering paradise. The mosque was constructed on the foundations of a Roman temple and also incorporates a later Christian shrine dedicated to St. John the Baptist. Why would the Caliph have chosen this site for his mosque? Answer in the comments below.
The Umayyad Caliphate functioned as a Roman successor state at Damascus, employing Greek-speaking bureaucrats and using the techniques of Roman governance. They also dominated the Mediterranean for generations, but inability to capture Constantinople checked their power. They were challenged by a rival dynasty, the Abbasids, which claimed descent from one of Muhammad's uncles and regarded the Umayyads as usurpers.
The Abbasid Caliphate stressed Persian elements. These included the capital at Baghdad. They would stylize themselves as Persian princes. They would have a Persian administration. They would impose heavy taxation to support a large professional army and a luxurious court. The world of the Arabian Nights, these stories written in Baghdad under the Abbasids, are an example. The reign of Harun al-Rashid, 786 to 809, was the height of Abbasid power. In 750, the Abbasids led a successful rebellion, forcing the Umayyads to retreat to Al-Andalus, what is Muslim Spain.
Arabs adapted to life in highly urbanized regions and to build on the long established commercial infrastructures of Egypt, Syria, and Persia. By the 10th century, Arab merchants had penetrated southern Russia and equatorial Africa. They were masters of the caravan routes that led eastward to India and China. They established new trade routes across the Indian Ocean, the Persian Gulf, and the Caspian Sea, and dominated the Mediterranean.
Drugs, perfumes, carpets, tapestries, brocades, woolens, satins, metal goods, all made by artisans, these would be carried along the Silk Road along with the Islamic faith.
The growth of commerce was driven by new industries. Mosul was a center for the manufacture of cotton cloth. Baghdad, that of glassware, jewelry, pottery, and silks. And of course, Damascus, fine steel and the woven figured silk known as damask.
Islamic culture became highly cosmopolitan, blending Arab customs with the civilization of the Byzantines and Persia. Trade and ease of travel increased geographic and social mobility. Morocco and Al Andalus, we would have their leatherworking centers becoming famous. In Toledo, of course, they churn out the most excellent swords, or at least they used to. Here is an example of the visual beauty of Arabic script. Although some Muslim regimes would protest against the depiction of human or animal figures, this did not deter artists from producing gorgeously illuminated manuscripts and carvings that gave the Arabic script a life of its own. This leaf from a Quran dating to about 800 CE turns the text itself into a visual feast of shapes and color.
Now let's turn our attention to the scholars of religious law and the place of the individual within the Islamic perspective. Ulamas, adherents to religious law. Sufis, the individual contemplation and cultivation of spiritual ecstasy. The Sufis were organized into brotherhoods, successful efforts to convert the peoples of Africa and India to Islam. Sufism also was a channel for intense religious impulses. Ability of the ulamas and the Sufis to coexist, which was a testimony to the pluralism of the Islamic world. Courts of Baghdad and Cordoba, open to men of talent, regardless of birth or wealth, the literacy was widespread. Rise through education and be promoted through skill. Islamic culture became highly cosmopolitan, blending Arab customs with the civilizations of Byzantium and Persia. Trade and ease of travel increased geographical and social mobility.
Islam offered two main alternatives for the religious life. The ulama, a learned man whose studies qualified him to offer advice on aspects of religious law and practice. The Sufis, as mystics, would rarely be segregated from society. Arguably, in the Islamic world, as much as the Christians may denigrate it, it is a world of progress, a world of mobility, education, thought, debate, the copying of text, the acceptance of new knowledge, all sheltered by the Islamic faith. Censorship wasn't necessarily feared. New contradictions to your argument were not feared as long as they did not go directly against the word of Allah. So, in that sense, the Islamic world has set itself up to be more progressive than Rome in some aspects, particularly in regards to accepting other cultures, but more conservative if we say look at the role of religion and women in change in society. They would certainly be more progressive than the Byzantines, looking to copy and learn and study and comment on, rather than just to, say, censor or ban. Social mobility would also open up, particularly with the rise of Islamic commerce. Remember, this, at least the Islamic world, is one that is open to the East, bringing goods from the East and taking them westward. This is a trade empire, just as much as it is militaristic, just as much as it is religion. It would not have been nearly successful as a militaristic empire, nor as a religion if it was not for the foundation of trade. The means of production matter, and in this instance, the Islamic peoples have it. So it can be easily understood why, in a world where you can advance socially based on how much money you have, you can advance into ease of comfort, accepting all the new technology, where as long as you have faith in Allah, you are accepted and you can explore what you will, as long as it doesn't go against any of the core tenets, and as long as you don't outright question Allah or go against the Islamic world in any way, you can practice what faith you want. Yes, you may have to pay some extra taxes, but really that's it. They took the best of the Persian worlds and really merged it with a brand new trade empire. But that said, it wasn't all positive. Let's get back to it before I digress.
When the Islamic world began to interact with Western Europe, there would be some changes. The Franks of Gaul also benefited from the Abbasids. Since the Umayyads controlled Al-Andalus, the Frankish ruler, Charlemagne, who reigned between 768 and 814, countered neighboring Muslims' power by maintaining diplomatic and commercial relations with the distant Abbasid Caliphate. Famous symbol of this connection, the elephant called Abu Abbas, a gift from Harun al-Rashid to Charlemagne. They established trading links with the Abbasid world, which helped fund the achievements of Charlemagne's empire and had a long effect on the culture and politics of Europe.
The triumph of the Abbasid Caliphate would also take pressure off Constantinople. More important, the flow of silver from the Abbasid Empire through the north and into the Baltic and the Rhineland, which would be exchanged, of course, for Frankish exports of furs, wax, honey, leather, and thus Europeans and often other Slavic peoples as well would be captured or sold for profit. What are the Europeans getting in return? Jewels, silks, spices, luxury goods from India and the Far East as they flow into Frankish territory. that brings us to an end of part two. Please tune in next week for part three. We get into the Franks and Gregory of Tours and much more as we turn our eyes away from Islam and now back toward the West, the Merovingians, and much, much more.